Hi, this is Mike, and we're going to see the software here called Shapr3D. This is the Mac version, and this is the software used for uh, parametric 3D modeling, and it's used for industrial design, 3D printing, and other precision modeling, and we can use this as well for modeling a character or objects for AR or VR. And this is the main view of the software where you can see the news. There are other things to see here as well. For example, on the learn time, you see tutorials, and those tutorials are quite good for you to learn all of the details and features. Some of them are interactive as well. And then we can just navigate to the design tabs where you can see our designs that I have created. And we're going to create the robot similar to this one. And we can just click here on new design to start with. So let's model something simple here so that we can explore the different tools in the software and understand how it works. It's a relatively more intuitive and simple 3D software compared to other traditional softwares such as Blender, 3ds Max, Maya, etc., or even Cinema 4D. But this one, you pretty much draw basic shapes and use them to cut or combine with other shapes, changing curves, etc., and then you can model your objects. And everything starts with 2D sketches, and then you can extrude them to 3D. So explaining the interface here, we have our canvas, a 3D canvas with three like horizontal lines or guidelines here, which are based on the gizmo. Gizmo is on the top right here. So if I click on this gizmo, I can change the angle of my camera, and if I click on the name that is on either any of the faces here of the gizmos, for example, front, top, or right, my view changes to orthographic view, so it doesn't have perspective anymore and correspond to the front in this case, or to the right, etc. It does make more sense when I have some object in the scene. So if I double click it, I get to perspective again. So let's start with the basic shape. So I want to make something that resembles a 3D rectangle, so to speak. So I'll click here on the rectangle tool from the sketch, and from any place I can just draw a rectangle. You see that the software is giving me already measurements of how big my shape is going to be. And in this case, it's quite small, like 20 millimeters by 30 millimeters. And those are real size scales, right? Or real size measurements. So in that sense, if I want something that small, that's correct, but I want a companion robot, for example, augmented reality, something the size of a ball, and that I can see on the ground, for example. So let's make it bigger. I can change those measurements here from 200, from 20 to 200. It's going to increase. And then I'm going to click here again. Click on the very edge here on the endpoint and change the other axis to also 200. So now I have like 20 by 20 centimeters square, and I need to make it 3D. So that's the base shape that's gonna give. And I have some other manipulation tools here, but to start with, I still just click here on this square, and then I'm gonna see an arrow point up and down. This is the extrude. So by default, when you draw something 2D with the sketch tool, you're gonna start with the extrude. This is gonna give depth to the object, and then I can increase, for example, to 200, and then I have a perfect cube, which I can just manipulate the way I want. Alright. To move around the camera like this, you can either click with the right mouse button or with the middle mouse button. In this case, I'm using the Mac version of the software. With the iPad, you just use touch. So this is helpful for me to already have a sense of how big I want my object to be. So I feel it's too tall for what I want, so I'm going to reduce this. So let's say 70, perhaps 100 maybe. Yes. and 180. That looks good. So I have a nice volume here for the shape I'm looking for. I want to make a robot, perhaps put a face here in the front, and the back of the robot, maybe some arms, some details on the side, and then I have a companion robot, like a flying robot that can be used on a VR or AR application. That's the basic shape. So when you highlight a face, you can click on it and to manipulate again, but you can also highlight just the edges, as you can see, and click on them. Click on the edges also gives the arrow, but it changes from extrude to chamfer fillet. So if I pull it out or in upwards, for example, outwards and inwards, it changes from chamfer or fillet. So that's round corners or flat corners. So if I want this kind of cubic type of shape to be more rounded, I can just hold Shift, move around, and click on all of the edges to select the 4 edges that I want to manipulate and do a fillet. As my object is 100 millimeters in height, I'll pull outwards, and with a radius of 50 millimeters, I get the perfect curve that I'm looking for. And now my object is already starting to get shape. It's quite easy. You just model something basic, like a cube, and you start to manipulate it. So you can add cut to it. So let's make a face on this robot, shall we? So I'll click on the face here. It gives me this selection again, but I don't want to extrude it anymore. I want to add some details inwards. So there are 2 ways of doing it. One way is to use shell. So on the left panel here, shell is going to make my volume hollow based on the face that I'm selecting. So just as an example, I'll click here and I'll pull it inwards. You see that this edge here is, all of the edges are the same thickness, but the front is hollow. So if I click here on View, Show Hidden Faces, and disable it, now I can have a better sense of how my shape's going to look like. But I don't want that, right? So I'm just doing some Control or Command Z here to return. And then I'm going to click on my face again, on this 3 dots more, and then Offset Edge, or can use the shortcut O. And then it's going to change to this highlight mode, and I can choose how many millimeters from the edge I'm going to move. I can do it the way I think it's proportional. 8 millimeters sounds about right for this volume. Perhaps a bit more. Let's say 10. Okay. And it creates a 2D shape on top of my 3D object. So if I look here, like a sketch, so on my layer list, if it's closed, by the way, you can press on the icon here on the top left, and you're gonna see the items, which are kind of layers, different objects in your scene. Then I press done. So it just created a sketch. So I have my basic sketch I have here that I started with, the shape that I created, and this new sketch that was created on top of the face that I selected with this offset tool. But now I have 2 different sketches, the out and the in one. So the inner one I can just pull inside. So if I pull it outside or push inside, I'm gonna carve the object or make the object extruded. It's still the same body. So you see, it's the same body object. Everything selected is just one thing. It's not 2 objects separate. You can also make them separate. So for example, if I extrude this, and I have a tiny icon here with combined objects, I can change from union, which is going to combine both the original and an extruded object, or I can change to subtract, intersect, or new body. New body is going to give me a separate body. So I'm going to have the original one and the extruded one. In this case, I just want union, but I want inwards. So I'm going to click here, go inwards. Let's say about 20. Sounds good. 20 millimeters. And if I want to add more detail, I can just repeat the process. select the face, 3 dots here more, and then offset edge. So let's offset it a bit more, 8. And done. And then we can push it inwards a little bit more. And then I have details. It's not so deep, let's say 4 millimeters. Now I have already some details, which makes the object a little bit more interesting. If I want to perhaps draw the eyes of the robot here, you see that I am in perspective mode, so I can either click on front and draw it on top of this axis already, or I can click on the face and hit space. Well, that's unexpected. Oh, okay. Let me see what happened. It's not selecting the way I want. It's selecting the plane. So let's get rid of those planes here. Command 1 moves me back to my object. By the way, if I'm far away and double click the gizmo, it also returns to the default view. Let's click on the front. So we can draw a circle maybe. So let's click on sketch. We have a few options here. We start with a rectangle, so we can draw a circle instead. Let's make a happy face, shall we? I'll draw a circle like here, in perfect direction. That's going to make my robot eyes a bit offset, but that amount sounds about right. And then I can use the offset edge to make it have some thickness. So I'm going to give thickness of 6, 8 millimeter. Sounds about right. And I'm going to draw a rectangle to cut it in half. You see, I'm just overlaying on top of each other here. They are all the same sketch, but the different shapes on top of each other. That doesn't matter. It's exactly what I want. What's going to happen when I hover my cursor on top of each of the segments, I'm going to have a separate object. So I just want this top one. I'm going to put in perspective, hold shift and right mouse click or middle mouse button press. And I'm going to pull it outwards. 8 millimeters. If you want, you can also type the value specifically that you want here. It's too much. Let's say 5. And then I also can click on the edges here, hold shift, click on the edges on the other sides as well, and pull outside to 4. That's gonna make my eyepiece rounded. You see that's on the top, but that's okay. So you can just delete these sketches that I created. Double click on this new body that I made. I'm gonna turn on the wireframes. So pressing view on the menu and select show hidden faces. So all of the edges are gonna be visible regardless if there is transparency or not. And then I can move my object to align with the base of my object body here, the main body. Now click on the front, move it down a little bit to how much you feel that's proportional to your model. And you notice there is a copy whenever you select something. So for example, if I select one face, nothing happens. But if I double click on that face, it selects the whole body, and then the copy button appears. So if you press copy, whatever you do now, rotate or move up or sideways, you're going to duplicate that object. So I'm going to zoom in and see. So I have 4. That sounds about symmetrical to me. So now my little robot already have some eyes. Looks a little bit more playful, I guess, right? So let's turn off these wireframes and work a bit on the back part of the robot. Let's start to do the same thing, perhaps add some different shape to it. A chamfer of 18, so I just click on the edge and push it inwards. This face, I'm going to do the same thing. So as the front, select the face, offset edge. That creates a new sketch. I'm going to mark down here how much I want it to go. And I think it's too long. Let's redo a little bit. I want to make this object smaller. Okay, 50 millimeters. That's a lot better. Okay, so let's restart it. Enter. Click more. More on the bottom. That works. Offset inwards about 8 millimeters. Click on done, and then I can click on the smallest one and push it inwards. Let's push it a little bit more. About 30. That sounds about right. I'll make this back part look like a turbine or some engine that makes the robot fly. Fictitious, by the way. So now I have some other options to make this model interesting. So let's add some details. So if I click on this face here, I have the option to pull it outwards or push it inwards. That's not going to make my object so interesting, right? That's not exactly what I want it to be. I want this to just equally move forward. How to do that? So I need the extrude feature here. Now the extrude, we extrude in a linear way. Okay. Let's move all the way to 40 millimeters maybe. See if it looks okay. No, too much. Reduce it to 30. That looks about right. But still a bit boring. You know what we're gonna do? Instead of making the same body, I'm gonna extrude, but mark down the end result as a separate body. So let's go again to 30. Instead of union, I'll select new body. So now that's a separate object, right? And then I'll click on the right side here. And now we can cut things. So how to cut? You also use 2D objects. So in this case, I'm going to click on Sketch, Line, and draw something. So I'll draw a shape that I want to cut it from, right? So I want this part out of my object. So I go back to perspective by holding Shift and right click or with the mouse button. Then I have my 2D design on this right viewport. I can just select the object now. If I push it the other way around, it's going to create a volume. But if I pull it towards me, look what's going to happen. These shapes going to cut the object out. Now I can just delete it, and I have a more interesting shape for my robot here. This already makes up the main of the body. So from here is about adding details and make it more polished, so to speak. So instead of these sharp edges, I can click on one of the edges and just move it outwards or inwards to make it rounded. Looks a little bit better. This one as well. 4, 5 millimeters. The same here. Three on the front. Center that good. Most of the details inwards. So I click on one of the edges and add some fillet. Make the inner part also smooth. And if I want to add colors to my object, I have this option here, visualization. This is to create a pre-render, which you can already have a preview of how your object is going to look like. You don't have external rendering needed for this, so just click on visualization. You see that all of the lines are gone, and it added shadows, a better illumination, so it's kind of pre-rendering the object. And I have a selection of different materials here. All of those materials also allow me, or pretty much the ones that doesn't have a texture, allow me to change the color. So in this case, the robot, I can make it like plastic, for example. So I have two plastic materials, multicolor or glossy one. Let's say I want the out part of it glossy. So I'm going to click on it and make it glossy. And if it's red as default, I want to change to white. So just click on the material that I've assigned to it and pick another color from here. So let's make it an off-white coat color. You can make the eyes blue perhaps, but not glossy, so I use this matte ABS for the eyes. And then I use the same for the other one as well, and change it to the hue to some blue. Okay. And this back part here, let's add also matte color, but let's make it black. I recommend not using too deep black, otherwise the details are gone. So let's use it some sort of dark gray. So dark gray is a bit better. Okay. And then you see that some parts are not colored in a very optimal way, because I'm adding color to separate entities, right? Separate object bodies. But if I want to add color to a specific face, I can also click on this face, and it already has a material assigned to it. So I can just change the hue, for example, to something different, so that is recognizable. So I deselect all, and then I change this material that was created automatically to something that I want. In this case, a dark color like this, pretty much black. So that's going to give me the contrast I need for the eyes to be visible. And I can do the same thing on the back part. So I can click on this material, all those faces here. And pick this black and put it here. So it kind of differs a little bit from this outer detail. And then the face. The object is still a bit boring. It looks like I don't know, a charger or something. But then we can make it more interesting by adding details. But to add details, the techniques are pretty much the same. We draw a 2D shape with a sketch, and then extrude it and cut it to add other details. So how to do it? Well, we can add some ears to the robot, so to make it more interesting. So just click on the face, press the spacebar. It gave me this top, and I can use a line perhaps to draw a triangle, right? So let's click on any point here on my grid. So I closed the lines. If I close the line, it allows me to draw a shape. If it's not closed, and then these are only reference lines. So now I have my triangle here. I can hold Shift and click on both of these parts and extrude. Remember that if you extrude from some connected shapes, because those edges at the bottom here, they're connected to the main one, they're gonna merge. By default, human is the default, is the option to combine both the new and the previous object. But if I select the new body, and then it creates a new body here as a separate item. So that's what I want to do. So this can be the base shape for an ear from a robot. And we can use, again, chamfer or fillet to make it interesting, or chamfer it. To the limit you can. Alright. And I'll click on this side edges again and chamfer a little bit more. So you see that from my base triangle, I already have a shape of an ear. And what's missing here is some roundness and also the concave part of the ear, right? It's too flat on the front. So for us to add this concave, we can perhaps add some roundness to this edge. So if you see better from here what's going on, it's a bit more interesting this way, right? And if I double click on the faces of this object, the whole body is going to be selected. I can click to select copy, so that's going to duplicate my object, and I'm going to move it towards the front of the ear. So now I have two ears on top of each other. So there I now have two separate bodies. I can select both of them from the layer list, or just shift and double click on either of the objects. And from the toolbar here, I'm going to select subtract. So subtract is going to use one body to subtract the shape of it towards the other body. So as you can see, this is the one that I'm using to cut the original one. Right? So the blue one cuts the purple one. If you want to, perhaps you've started the other way around, but it's not the way you want, you can change the order of the cutting. So now this blue one cuts the purple one, but no, that's not very well. It was okay already. So if it is the way I want, I can just press done and delete the original object. So I already have my concave here. So from here I can just smooth out the edges that I want. I select one edge from continuous line, and then I can really fill it and make it smooth. If you will push or pull to a value that it's not physically or mathematically possible, the software is gonna reject and move to its original value, original position, and I have to try again. So it's like by eye I can already see like operation failed because the resulting body wouldn't be valid. So just pay attention to this. Let's also work on the bottom part here. So I have it here. So just double click now. I click on the front. Adjust it to the position I want. About that. And then I can copy and move the other one all the way around here to the other side. And it looks symmetrical. I can get rid of the sketches from the layer list, right click and delete. So now it already starts to look cute. But still look like a charger. Alright. Maybe I could add some arms to it, right? Would make it interesting. So I can just go to the side of it. then I'm gonna draw a rectangle. Pretty simple. Draw a rectangle. We can exit sketching. Attached to the grid on this side. You can move it. I press N to move. You can move it a little bit so that it matches with the center of my shape. Alright, extrude, and make it rounded. So I click on the 4 edges, hold Shift, click, and make it rounded. The same thing on the outer part. Let's go zoom a little bit more. Perfect. Let's do it again. That's enough. So that part's not connected to the main object. So one thing we can do is double click on this new body and move it inwards so that overlaps with the original shape. Let's move it with millimeters. Ten it's okay. It would be still okay, but the objects are overlapping and that might not look so great. So if you want to have a perfect cut instead, you can double click on this object and hold Shift and double click on this main body and select Subtract. Now pay attention to this keep original here. So remove bodies. I can remove the negative or the positive, or none, or all of the bodies. So I'll keep this selection here. The remove bodies I will keep. So I'm using the main body, the big one, to remove from the smaller one, which is selected by purple here. So I'm gonna keep my original one, right? The remove bodies. If I select none, this one's gonna disappear after I finish my work, and then I use it. Yeah. So double click, subtract, keep removed, and done. Now if I move it just to pick it has this subtracted shape frame, so it fits perfectly. You can also do the other way around, so you can also carve this arm body into this main body as well, so it's up to you. In that case, I can just double click or select from the layer and also press 8. Double click, and more options and mirror. When I click mirror, it's going to ask from which axis I want to mirror it from. So I want this vertical axis. Okay, this one sounds about right. Oh, sorry. Double click, more, mirror. Select the green one and keep origins on, so I have a duplicate. So I can click on this new bar that I created and move it to the other side of the robot. Alright, I can just click in front, and now I'm going to move to the correct place. Okay, we're done. We have details in our robots. we have worked with a sketch, objects to cut or to extrude, mirror, carve, and manipulate the edges. This way you can create very interesting objects. So just for a final detail, we can start assigning materials, the same materials, I'm not creating new ones, to these new objects that we created. So they also have materials and look nice. You can use other types of materials. Some of them have transparency as well, so this will happen when I add transparency. So for example, you can draw a cup or a bottle, for example, and then you can use a glass material in this case. Now this object can be exported right from here in Shapr to different 3D object formats. For example, FBX. So FBX is going to be compatible with Blender, and from Blender you can add textures or manipulate the mesh of the object, something that's not possible in Shapr3D. Or you can export already in format of USDZ. So USDZ is going to be really compatible with iOS devices, iPhone, iPad, so you can preview in augmented reality there, or even work with the Reality Composer, both on macOS or iOS systems, or iPadOS as well. So that's how we make a robot with Shapr3D. Let's now export our object ready for augmented reality in the USDZ file format, which is compatible with iOS devices, iPad or iPhone, for example, and also with Reality Composer, both on iOS devices and macOS. So from the main menu here at the top, you can just select File and then Export, and you're going to see different usage or by file format. So for by usage type, I can select here augmented reality, and file type that's going to export is USDZ. As you can see from the list here, there are different file formats. So for example, just a render, then you can export a PNG or JPEG object. Sketches, the output is going to be the measurements of your object in a 2D file format, and other 3D file format for different applications here for CAD softwares as well, or even other 3D modeling softwares. For example, if you want to edit in Blender, you can use this OBJ. And here also for the 3D printers, so STL file format. This program, by the way, is very good for 3D printing. I've done 3D printing with this before, so you just model it and you're going to 3D printing the object exactly to the measurement and scales that you have created in the software. So I'm going to select USDZ here for augmented reality, and this format here is going to keep all of my colors and textures that I have applied in the software, for example, the blue eyes of the robot and everything. So I press on Next. Export for Apple AR, and here I have some options. So include hidden layers. If I have any hidden layers, going to be included, or if I don't want to include hidden layers and yet don't delete them from the software, for example, you can just uncheck this. Include mesh bodies. This is what we want. Those are the actual shapes. And include visualization materials. So those are the textures and colors applied to the robot. Without this, the object is pretty much gray. So let's include both and press on Next and save it in the computer. Alright, so it's going to give me here a location. So I already have one robot that I've modeled before. So I'm going to give another name here, Cat2, and save it on my computer. Now we can just send this file to an iOS device, for example. So Cat2 is the one that I just saved. So right click and select Share, and in this case I use AirDrop, and then I'll see when my device is going to appear. My iPad's here, and done. this is the object that I have imported. So it's in the USDZ file format, and I imported from the computer. If I tap on it, it's on an iPad. I can preview it the object mode or AR mode. So in object mode, I can see the colors and textures. It retained all normal. So if I select AR, I'm gonna map my desk here. I'll pull the object all the way to the top of the desk. As you can see, 100% is the size that I've modeled in the software. It retained the textures, the colors, as I have modeled. You can also make it fly a little bit. And this is how I preview objects modeling Shapr3D in augmented reality. So if you want to add interactions or make this robot move around or fly, etc., jump, or add to other buttons, react to things, you can import this right on Reality Composer. So it'll be 100% compatible, and Reality Composer is available for macOS and iPad as well, also on iPhone. So it's already possible to use this object and play with it in AR quite easy.